Mariam is an attorney at Prime Counsel Law Firm and a law professor at Bay Atlantic University. Joins me now live via Skype from Washington, D.C. Good to have you with us, Ms. Atash, on the programme. It's an interesting move by the US, but is it legal?
I think we really have to address that issue at this time. I mean, there's talk that this executive order unfreezes the funds, but legally that's not what it's doing and that's not what it can do. It just frees up the possibility that the federal court would do that. But I think that looking at this, we have to really zone in on the issue. Who do these funds belong to? They don't belong to the Taliban. They belong to the Central Bank of Afghanistan, which was part of a government estate. And that was backing up commercial banks in Afghanistan. So part of the money belonged to depositors. So think about it, if you're in your country and you deposited money in a bank, your government, collapses, and then other parties want to take money that you've been waiting for access to. So legally, I think that this is the issue, is that, let's get a little bit of context here as well. The U.S. was negotiating with the Taliban starting from 3 years ago. Many would argue that the U.S. allowed the Taliban to come into power with no plan, no conditions. The withdrawal was botched, and now the U.S. is trying to put some conditions, but using these funds that are needed to infuse the Afghan economy with capital. Right now, there have been restrictions on how much people can take because there's a fear of capital flight. The economy is collapsing. Civil servants haven't gotten paid. But in the end, Afghans' children are starving, and we're holding up money in a legal process.
OK, Mr. Tash, let's just focus then back in on the legality of what's happened. History often shows that a change of regimes in a country that often leads to a fight over assets, which is what you've just been telling us of. What's the legal interpretation of that situation under normal circumstances, if there is anything that we can call normal?
Right. We're in a very interesting situation where the U.S. has itself stated that it's not recognizing the Taliban government. So in that context, the Taliban don't have legal authority over funds that were collected in the name of the Central Bank of Afghanistan, which was part of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. So it's not really legal to issue executive orders. And as capable and smart as federal judges are, they're probably not given the context of the governing situation there. Just because the Taliban have taken over doesn't mean that they own legal title to funds that were collected in the state's name. And if the U.S. is not recognizing that entity as owning those funds, then how is it going to allow those funds to be used to pay for judgments against that entity? What the U.S. needs to do is it should have been looking for Taliban assets in the last 20 years. Where are those assets? Taliban were being funded, whether they're in bank accounts in Pakistan or other countries. That's the legal, work that should have been done, using this money and freezing it and for months while the Afghan economy collapses and children die. There's a moral wrong to it, but it's also not legally correct, in my opinion.
So if you have an organisation or a government, as we are seeing it now, as the Taliban are, but they're not recognised internationally, either by sovereign states or by the UN, how do they then fight this? Would they or can they fight this legally via any route in the courts, either through the US or in another third country?
Well, this is the legal limbo that we are in. If the Taliban are not recognized as the government of Afghanistan, then they're not owning those funds. The question becomes, who can even defend the rights of the Central Bank of Afghanistan? And in that situation, then these legal questions should not be presented where that entity does not have legal representation. That would be what's called inequitable under the law. Sometimes you have to do it based on matters of justice. I mean, the U.S. were based on rule of law and justice. We said we were going to Afghanistan to instill democracy. Obviously, that did not happen. But we as a nation, we as a country should follow those same legal principles that we are expecting others to do so. So we have to find another solution, whether it's using this trustee system. All the funds should be with a trustee in the meantime, and it can be managed through the central bank without giving Taliban control, because we have to realize there's a private sector in Afghanistan that has ownership of funds. not even the government. And that would be a solution that would be equitable, that does not take away from the claims and judgments that families of 9/11 have. Those are claims, but this is just not the right pot of money to obtain those funds from.
It's a very complicated situation that we'll be keeping a very close eye on. For the moment, Mariam Atash, thanks very much for joining us from Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Thank you.